All right, so this little video is about types and types for values. So there are different types of values in JavaScript, or values could have different types. So let's start with numbers. So I'm going to create a variable, and if you don't know what a variable is, then you can go and have a look at the variable video. This is kind of one of the hard parts about teaching programming, because it's hard to explain one thing without knowing anything about the other. So how do you explain variables without going into different types, things that you have to put inside of variables? But yeah. Anyway, so variable, I'm going to create a new one, declare this one called numbers, and I'm going to add a number. So that's one of the types that you could have. And the number can be either like, okay, I'm going to call this one actually integer. Let's add a comment up here and say numbers. So integer is any number that doesn't have a decimal point. In Swedish, it's called heltal. I don't know what that is in other languages, but integer is, it is what it is. It can be 42, it can be minus 42, it can be 0, it can actually be minus 0, but that one is weird. So yes, and then there is float. And a float is a number with a decimal point. So pi, for instance, is a float. It is a number and it's a float. 42 is an integer and a number. So they're all numbers. And what can you do with numbers? Well, you can do a lot of things, like you can do math with them. If we combine them with an arithmetic operator between two numbers, like 42 minus 2, oh, sorry, that was minus 2, let's do 42 minus 4 plus 2, and that evaluates to 40, right? So you can do things, and you can say like 10 plus 3.14, and so you can combine an integer with a float, and that will of course become a float. So that's things that you can do with numbers. If I had a number, let's take our variable here. I have to declare it, I suppose, integer, and assign it the value 42, and now it's the variable integer is pointing at the number 42. That it has that value right now, right? 42 is part of integer. So if I try to output or evaluate the variable integer, so I have to look at my keyboard. I can't watch the screen. I'm lousy at that. But if I try to evaluate the variable integer, I get back the number that I just assigned to it, right? So other things that you can do with when you have a variable that contains a number type, then you can use plus integer, and that will increase the value of that number. So if I say well, I can take a new one, var float equals 3.14, and I say plus float, it becomes this. It added some for some reason. That is interesting though. And the same thing with minus integer. That would take us back to 42, I guess. So minus integer will first decrease the value that I have 42, the number value that I have, from 43 to 42, and then it will evaluate that variable and output it as 42. If I instead say integer minus minus, then it will first evaluate integer, output that, and then afterwards it will decrease the value. So here it says 42, but if we will look again, it's actually 41. So here the decrement happened afterwards. All right, so that's the number type. It's useful for anything that needs to be calculated with. All right, and then there's the other simple one called strings. So var string is anything inside quote marks. It's a textual value. It's a textual type of value. So any characters within quotes. And it doesn't matter if you have double quotes or single quotes. So let's say I have this variable, HTML element. I want to describe that. And since you know that an HTML element might look like this, a href equals, and then there's these quote marks here. And I'm just going to point to home.html. Now, if I try to put quote marks around this, it's going to be weird. Because then this part is a string and this part is a string, so you can't decide really. So instead you could use single quotes around that, and that's still a string. So you can decide if you want to use single quotes or double quotes. And now these double quotes in here are just part of the string. They're not evaluated as quote marks. They're just, well, any character that happens to be inside of my string. Strings are used especially for when we have input or output, so that we're trying to send a message and we try to receive something. Let's say we have a web page and we have a text field in there, a form field. So any method that we use to try to get the value of that one, we will get that back as a string. Same thing goes for the function prompt. If I call the function prompt, I pass in a string. To talk to the prompt window, I pass in a string and say, hey, ask this question. Are you good? And this string will be passed to the function, and it will write that message that you have within the quote marks, that string, in its dialog. And when you capture it in a variable, the results of the return value of this function call will also be a string. So whatever you type in that prompt window will be a string. So this expression here will be evaluated to a string, and that string will be assigned to, oh, sorry about that one, will be assigned to the variable, right? Stupid name. So strings, yes, just text. Even though you say, like, even though I type in a number here, that number is now the textual characters 3 and 2 in that order. All right, So you can't do any math with them. So that's string. Take that one out for now. Then we have something called Booleans. And they can have two values only. But the value itself is a Boolean. It can be either true or it can be false. Now, if you see, I don't have any quote marks around this, so it's not a string false. This is its own value, false. It's its own value type, a Boolean, and it can be either true or false. And it is used inside of if statements. So when you need to make decisions, for instance, so they're called conditionals in computer language. So let's say I have an if statement. We'll get into that later on. And I in this case, I don't even have to make a test. I can just say that if Boolean, then, I don't know, alert the Boolean is true. Now in this case this wouldn't happen because Boolean happens to be false. But if I change this one, now this will be evaluated to true, and whenever it says true in here, whenever the expression that I put in here is evaluated to true, it will run this. Or if you have many statements to run, then you can combine them, of course, with curly brackets. That's how if statements work. Let's get into that later on, but anyway. So Booleans are great for decision making when you have conditional statements of some sort inside of loops, for instance. Should I run this loop one more time? True or false? If it's true, it will run one more time and it will check again. So a Boolean, or false. So these are the three of the basic types, and then we have the no value. What is that? The no value. The absence of a value can either be like I'm just going to call it undef here. If I do it like this, I just create a variable, but I don't assign a value to it, it will become undefined. When I say it will become, I mean that the value undefined will be assigned to the variable undef. So undefined is its own value type. It's no quote marks around, it's not true, it's not false, it's not a number. It's undefined, and it can only have that in all lowercase. Oh, that goes for true and false, lowercase. Another one is, I'm going to call this in capital letters just to, doesn't like that. I'm going to call it nolly or something like that. Now this will also become undefined if I just do this. But if I say something like document get elements by ID, and I'm trying to find the element called not here, an HTML element that is not present in the HTML page where I'm trying to find it. If I'm trying to do that, then nolly will become null. And when I say become, I mean it will be assigned the value null in all lowercase. So this is the absence of a value as well, but in different scenarios. And of course, I can, just like this, I can assign them from the start, and then I can change its value afterwards. So these are 4 basic types. Yeah. And I would say, what's the use for this one and that one? Well, I seldom use them. They just become. That's the normal case. So when I get an error, it says I can't find the property of null. That means something didn't work and the document was not found, or the HTML element wasn't found with that, if I was trying to do some DOM manipulation of some sort. Later, I'll find a video about that as well. All right, but these are anyway values. So let's go into the more complex forms of value types. And I'm going to start with array. So an array is anything between square brackets. Just like strings are anything between quote marks, this is the surroundings around an array, square brackets. But of course, I can't just start typing. Well, I could, but then JavaScript would think that this is a variable name that could be evaluated to something, and that this array will only have one item. If I try to copy whatever was in here, like this, I would actually get an error because of the spaces here between these 1, 2, 3, 4 variables. If I added comma between them, then they would become like different items in my array. But I'm jumping ahead a little bit. So an array is a list of other things, a list of other values. Normally, when you use an array, you have a list of items of the same type. So it could be a list of numbers of different kinds, 42, 23, 12, and so on. So here I now have a variable containing one value. That one value is an array. The array itself contains 3 values. So it's like a bag of things. Like you put, what do you have in an array? Well, I have this bag of 3 apples in it, whatever. I made another like metaphor. I was talking about arrays as like a storage shelf. Like on these large storages like IKEA and Maersk and whatever. They have numbers like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if you put something on spot 0, well, that's the address for that shelf space. And that's how array works. So if I were trying to fetch something, if I wanted to get the number 42 out of this array, I would have to type. So let's copy this here. Copy, and let's open up this one. And I just paste it in here and I say, what is array? It's that one. That's the type, that's the content. That's this one value. These 3 numbers with comma separated and with square brackets around it. So to find one of them, to get one of them out, I have to type array and square brackets and a number. And the number is the index, the storage shelf address. And the first one is called 0. And that will give me back 42. 1 is 23. And 2 is 12. If I try to access something that isn't there, it returns undefined. It's that value. Because it hasn't been defined yet. Because you put nothing in there. All right. So yeah, that's arrays, and they're very useful because you can iterate through them. I mean, like loop through them, and it's easy since they have number indexes. It's easy to find them with using an integer variable that can change inside the loop, and I can say that the first time it's going to be 0, the next time it's going to be 1, and so on. So arrays, normally they're used to store many items of the same type. All right. Very useful value type, the array. And in many cases, this is what is returned, for instance. So when we try to fetch an HTML element's children, we get them back as an array of HTML elements that we can loop through. So that happens in many cases. Yeah, so you need to know about arrays and how they work. And there are tons of methods and stuff for arrays. I'm just going to show you this very simple property that is part of any array. Just by putting an array type inside a variable, I get this for free, a ton of things, like this property here that gives me the number of items that I have inside my array. And there's built-in functions that I didn't create, they're just there. As soon as you create an array, you get them for free, like pop. Now that takes out the last item, removes it from the array, and returns it. So now array is just 42 and 23, and 12 has been popped out from the end of that array. So array is useful, and that's how they look like. That one item, that one thing, that value. All right, so let's try another strange type, an object. Objects are very similar to arrays in that they have some sort of brackets around them. In this case, we have curly brackets instead of square brackets. And yeah, you remember that 42 here had the number 0 assigned to it. So that was kind of the name of this first value. And the second value had the name 1, or that address or the index. In objects, you create whatever you like. Or sorry, you name your spots, or whatever you want to call them, whatever you like. In JavaScript and in programming, normally you could say that they are keys, or tags, could be a thing. A variable within the object. So it's a name that identifies a value inside this object. So an object is also kind of like a list, but maybe see them more as a collection of properties for a specific thing. And the word property is something that is used when we try to describe the different parts of an object. So let's say, I'm just going to make this simple, stupid example. Foo is 42. So now we have an object with one item inside of it, one property of this object, and the value of that is 42. So to get that one, I just copy that line of code here, and I paste it in here. An object is this. Oh, let's look. It has foo inside of it, and it's 42. So to find that, kind of, like the array, I would use square brackets, and I would type 0. Doesn't work here. I could do this. Now you see the resemblance with the array, but it's kind of, you know, many different keystrokes that you have to make on your keyboard, so it's a lot faster to just type object and using dot notation. And well, you see also your browser will find whatever is inside of that object. I just created foo. Where do the other things come from? Well, they got there for free. It's part of, it's a long story. Let's not get there right now. So object.foo is 42. So that's how you access the number, the value that I put inside the object, sorry, the property that I named foo. You can name them like this. You can actually name them like a string as well, like this. Both work fine. Sometimes you can, I mean, you can like foo-do. I can do this, which would be very stupid, but I can do it, and it will still work. So if I copy this, yeah, you don't get any error. But if I try to fetch it, how do I get that one using dot notation? You see, I can't even find it here anymore, because I can't type foo space do, unexpected identifier. But I can type object square bracket and within quote marks foo do, and that will give me that property value. All right, so let's not do that. So what do objects actually like do? Well, you can use them to describe things that has different properties of different sorts, and use them as data structures for more complex things in your program. Just as an example of a thing that would work perfectly as an object, using the object type, is to describe a person. So var person, that's going to be my variable name that I'm going to assign this object to. Starts with these. This is an empty object, and I'm going to add a new property to it. I'm going to call it name. So this person's name then is John, comma separated just like the array. I add another property, and I'm going to say another property is age for this person. Now this person's age is 23, the number. So first we have a string in name, and now in age we have a value of type number. And then siblings, is that like this? I'm not sure. Sibling one or double B, I'm not sure. Let's try this. Siblings, oh, plural. That means there could be more than one. So perfect. We have arrays, like, so we can add as many siblings that we want. So one of John's siblings is Eve, and the other, the sister Eve, and the brother Steve. So we can add one thing to sibling, but we need two names. Perfect. We have the array. So now we can add just one array containing two names. So how would I even find Steve in here? Well, if we look in here again and just paste that line here, and person, now if I just type that, you can have a look at this object. Age is 23, name is John, siblings is an array, so I can pull that one down, and 0 is Eve, and 1 is Steve. So to find Steve, I would type in person dot notation and siblings, And since siblings is an array, I would use square brackets to tell which one, the one on index 0 or the one in index 1. I'm going to use the one in index 1. And that will return Steve. Person dot siblings, which is an array, 0 and 1. So to get Steve, I say square brackets 1. Because siblings contains an array. Objects often also contains functions. But what are functions? Well, functions is also another type. I can declare it using var and say myfunc equals, and then this is a value. It doesn't look like objects, it doesn't look like arrays, it doesn't look like strings or anything because it has so many strange things in it, but it is one value. Even though I actually could do like this. So inside my function, I have a bunch of statements. Now, it doesn't look like a value. It looks like a script. Well, since JavaScript has something called, well, no, I'm not going to get there. Sorry. So, yeah, the function and how many statements there is in, I'm going to go into functions more later on, but this is just so you have this in one place. What are the different types? A function is also a value type. So let's alert hello world. So this is something that could be called or you can invoke the function, but this is the value of the variable myfunc right now. And this will never happen just by having this line here. Now, Adam can't alert things. Let's console.log instead. Copy that part. So if I do this, I get undefined. I don't get the hello world. So myfunc, if I just say, so evaluate myfunc, what do you get? This is what it is. It's a function. All right, but how do I get it to log hello world? You add parentheses afterwards, and that's how you call. How do you say, hey, Mr. Function, can you just take whatever you have inside of you and just do them now? Then you add the parentheses, and boom, here comes hello world to the console here. But that's a function call, so that's a different thing. But this is the function value. And it could be added to, well, for instance, this, if I copy this part and I say, well, add another property to person that says speak. That's going to be the name of that property. And I paste in that function. So this is one value. There can be only one value in each of these properties. Here it's an array, and here it's a function. So it works out great. All right. So functions also its own type. Weird, sure. And oh, by the way, doing it like this, we'll get into that. You can do it in different ways, but functions in themselves are its own type. However strange you may find that. But that wraps it up for types, and I didn't talk about type conversions, but okay, let's do that then. I can't convert between functions and like these strange things over here, but we can have a look at numbers and strings. So let's say I have an integer, so integer equals 42, and that's 42. Let's say I, for some reason, want that one to become a string. Then I can say string, and I'm just pass in integer as the value, the input here as an argument to calling string, and out comes 42 as a string. This is evaluated to this when it runs. If I wanted to save this somewhere else, I would have to say, like, if I wanted to save it back to integer, I would have to say that integer equals string integer. And that may look strange to some of you. So you have it on the right side and you have it on the left side. The assignment, yeah, nothing strange about that. This side will be evaluated first into this one value, and when there's one value left, it will assign it back to here. So it not change it before. It's okay, what's inside of integer? Well, it's 42. Okay, so what do you get if you try to pass in 42 to string? Well, you get back 42 as a string. You get the characters 4 and 2 in a row surrounded by quotes, and that back into integer. So that's what's happening. You can also do the same for if you have, like, if you asked for a number in a prompt and you'll get back. So let's say my answer, I'm just gonna type answer without the var here, answer equals, and then it might become like 34. So I can't say, so I want that. So I'm gonna, in my script, okay, so you're 34, then next year you will be, and I would try to do like plus answer. And that just works. So JavaScript is awesome. Sometimes it just do the conversions for you. So it had to convert 34 to be able to do an increment. So it did it, and out comes an integer. And now answer is not the string anymore. So let's put the string back. Answer equals the string 34. Right, double check. But now what if we say answer plus 4? That should be 38, right? But it becomes 344 because it's a string, and strings can be concatenated. That's what it's called when you merge two strings together. That's so the plus, the arithmetic plus here is when there's a string on one side, it converts the other one to a string as well, if it's not before, and then it adds them together, this one after that one. So just to make this super clear, if I say hello plus world, I'm concatenating those. I'm not doing any math here, and that becomes hello world as one string, right? And if I say 2 plus 3, that becomes 2, 3. Looks like 23 though. sure, but it's a string. But it's been, yeah, so they're concatenated. And you can convert this if you just want, okay, I would just want this to be a number. I don't want to add or subtract, I just want to do it as a number. So I'm just going to type number, and if I just type in here 23, I will get back the number 23. If I say number, and instead I pass in answer, which right now happens to be 344, I will get back, oh, it wasn't. Yeah, I didn't change it. I just looked at this expression and what that evaluates to. And that's 34 because it was, that's what I assigned to it, the string 34. And now I convert it to a number, and out comes 34, the number. Yeah, so you can do this for actually for Booleans as well, but number and string like this, actually they're capital S, capital N. So what you're actually doing is that you're creating a number object. So it's not some would say it's not the perfect way to do this, because it's you create an object or whatever. You can also do it like this, convert it to a number. So if I say answer, no, parse int, and then I say answer. So parse int is another built-in function that takes a string or a float, I think actually, and returns an integer, to be more precise. Great word. All right, so what if we put in 3.14? I will get 3 back. What about 3.84? I get 3. I get the integer part of this float. You can also do parse float like this, and I could add a string that looks like a float, and I will get back 3.15. So there's another way to convert to strings. Like you can convert strings to integers, like with parse int and parse float. And when it comes to number, to go to strings, you could use, like we did before, string and then add a number, right? But if you have a number inside of a variable, like so num contains 32, then I can say num.toString, and that gives me 32. But I can't type 32.toString. That will not work. Beats me why. Should be possible, I think. And because there's these built-in functions to strings. So if I just type in a string here, my string, and I want to find out how many letters are in how many characters are in this string, I could actually type in dot length here, and I get back 9. Just like with the array, any string has a built-in length property, like if it was an object, and right now it converts it to a string object so that it can find its length property and return that one. That's a bit too much maybe right now, but still cool, isn't it? All right, so that wraps it up for types, value types.